I never thought I would be the kind of man who enjoyed revenge. For most of my life, I believed in keeping my head down, doing the right thing, and trying to be the bigger person. I wasn't loud. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't the kind of guy who picked fights or made scenes. But there comes a point when life pushes you so far and one person takes so much from you that a small part of you starts hoping you'll get to see them lose. Not because you're cruel, not because you're evil, but because after years of being humiliated, controlled, and broken down, something inside you just wants proof that they're not untouchable anymore. This happened back in 1992, when I had finally had enough of my wife. And when I say enough, I mean I was done in a way that goes beyond anger. I was empty, numb, drained. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from waking up every day wondering what version of the person you love is waiting for you on the other side of the room. If you had met my wife in public, you probably would have thought she was incredible. That was part of the trap. She knew exactly how to wear a mask. Around other people, she could be funny, charming, magnetic, and full of life. She could laugh at the right moment, flirt just enough to make everyone like her, and make you feel like you were the luckiest man in the room just because she had chosen you. But behind closed doors, she was somebody else entirely. She knew how to cut me down without leaving a bruise anyone else could see. She knew exactly what to say, exactly when to say it, and exactly how to make me feel smaller than I already did. At first it was subtle, little comments, tiny humiliations disguised as jokes, the kind of things you laugh off in front of people and replay in your head alone at night. Then it became criticism. Everything about me was wrong. The way I dressed, the way I talked, the way I handled money, the way I breathed, for all I know. There was always something to pick apart, something to mock, something to use as proof that I wasn't enough. And after a while, you stop defending yourself. You stop believing your own version of reality. You stop asking whether they're being fair because you're too busy trying not to make things worse. Then came the control. Where I went, who I saw, how long I stayed, who I spoke to, what I was doing, what I meant when I said something simple. Every harmless thing somehow became suspicious, disrespectful, selfish, or wrong. My whole life got smaller and smaller until it felt like I was living inside her moods instead of inside my own mind. And then there were the fights. Real fights. The kind where objects get thrown, doors get slammed so hard the walls shake. The kind where 1 second you're trying to calm someone down, and the next second they're in your face, screaming, scratching, hitting, daring you to react, so they can become the victim. And every time, somehow, it ended the same way. First came the rage, then the tears, then the apology that wasn't really an apology, then the blame, then the twisted little performance of love that kept me trapped there longer than I should have stayed. I told myself it would get better more times than I can count. I told myself she was hurting. I told myself she didn't mean it. I told myself maybe I could fix it if I just stayed calmer, spoke softer, tried harder, loved her better. That's the lie people in abusive relationships tell themselves when they're desperate to believe there's still something left to save. But eventually, you hit a point where your soul just stops volunteering for pain. It doesn't happen in some dramatic movie moment. It happens quietly, One day you just realize you cannot live like this anymore. And once that realization becomes real, there's no going back. So I left. I didn't leave in some heroic, cinematic way. I didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't have a new life waiting for me. I just couldn't take one more day of being treated like I was less than human in my own home. I packed what I could, grabbed the things that mattered, and got out. A couple of buddies took me in, good men, the kind who didn't need every detail to understand that I was not okay. They didn't push. They didn't lecture. They didn't act like I had to be over it just because I was finally out. They let me exist. And after what I had been living in, even that felt strange, because leaving doesn't instantly make you feel free. People who've never lived through it think once you walk out the door, that's it. You're done. But that's not how it works. When you've spent years surviving somebody else's anger, your body doesn't just relax because the address changed. You stay on edge. You stay alert. You expect every phone call to be a problem, every knock at the door to be a threat. Every quiet moment feels temporary, like something bad is still coming. That's how I was. Hollow, tense, exhausted, and trying to figure out who I was without her voice in my head. I didn't know how to be relaxed anymore. I didn't know how to be happy. I barely knew how to sit in silence without feeling like I had forgotten to prevent some disaster. Then one night, one of my friends looked at me and said, "Come on, we're going out." I told him I wasn't in the mood. He said that was exactly why I needed to go. He also said he knew somebody I might get along with. I rolled my eyes and told him not to play matchmaker, but he just laughed and said I didn't need to marry the woman. I just needed to remember I was still alive. And honestly, I almost didn't go. I almost stayed on that couch with a beer and another miserable evening in my own head. But I went. And if I hadn't, I never would have gotten one of the sweetest moments of my entire life. We ended up at a small local bar. Nothing fancy. Just one of those neighborhood places with low lighting, worn bar stools, a jukebox in the corner, cigarette smoke hanging in the air, and the smell of old beer soaked into the wood. The kind of place where everybody either knew each other or pretended they did. And that's where I met her, the woman my friend wanted me to meet. The first thing I noticed about her wasn't how pretty she was, though she was. It was how calm she felt. There was no chaos around her, no performance, no tension, no need to dominate the room. She was just warm, easy to talk to, the kind of person who makes you feel safe without even trying. And after what I had just come out of, that almost hit me harder than attraction. We sat down, had a drink, started talking, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. Normal. Not exciting, not dramatic, not intense, just normal. I laughed. I actually laughed. And if you've ever been miserable long enough, you know how shocking that can feel when it happens naturally. My shoulders loosened. My chest didn't feel tight. I wasn't monitoring every word that came out of my mouth. I wasn't bracing for some emotional explosion. I was just sitting there, having a conversation with a woman who seemed genuinely happy to be in my company. For maybe an hour, I forgot what my life had become. For maybe an hour, I got to feel like myself again. Then the front door opened, and my whole body went cold. Some people can walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere without saying a word. My wife was one of those people. The second I saw her, It felt like somebody had poured ice water straight down my spine. My stomach dropped so fast it was almost physical pain. My friend noticed the look on my face immediately and turned to see what I was looking at. The second he saw her, he muttered under his breath, "Oh no," because there she was, my soon-to-be ex-wife, standing in the doorway like a nightmare that had somehow put on lipstick and heels. And the moment she saw me, I knew exactly what kind of night it was about to become. She froze for half a second. Then she smiled. Not a surprised smile. Not a happy smile. A cruel smile. A calculating smile. The kind of smile that says, "Oh, this is going to be fun." And just like that, she started her little show. I have never seen anyone work so hard for attention in my life. Within minutes, she had transformed into the biggest barfly you could imagine. She floated from one man to another like she was performing on a stage, laughing too loudly, touching arms, running her hands across shoulders, leaning in close, kissing cheeks, whispering in ears, acting like she was the most desirable woman in the room. And every few seconds she looked straight at me, not casually, not accidentally, deliberately. She wanted me to watch. She wanted me to react. She wanted me jealous, humiliated, angry, and embarrassed. She wanted to remind me that she could still get under my skin whenever she wanted. Because that's what abusive people hate most when you leave them. Not losing you, losing control. And she was trying desperately to get that control back in front of an audience. My date noticed what was happening. My friend noticed too. He leaned toward me and quietly said, "Take it easy. She's just trying to get a reaction." And he was right. That was exactly what she was doing. So right then and there I made a decision. I was not going to give her one. Now let me be very clear about something. The woman I was with that night was not some prop in a revenge fantasy. She knew my situation. She knew what I had been through. And before I did anything, I leaned over and quietly asked her if she would mind if I put my arm around her. I wanted to make sure she was comfortable. I wanted her to know she had a choice. She looked at me with the sweetest little smile, took my arm herself, and placed it around her shoulders. That tiny gesture changed everything. Because suddenly, instead of looking like the broken man my ex expected to find, I looked calm, comfortable, unbothered. I wasn't sitting there miserable while she put on her performance. I was laughing, relaxed, close to another woman who clearly enjoyed being with me. And the second my ex saw that, I could practically feel her rage from across the room. Her fake laughter got louder. Her body language got more dramatic. Her little performance became almost cartoonish. She was trying harder and harder and harder to provoke me. And every second I stayed calm was driving her crazier. It was written all over her face. She wasn't winning. She was unraveling. And for the first time in a very long time, I got to sit back and watch her lose control instead of me. But even though I looked calm, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little worried. Because there was one thing my wife was known for. She could fight. And I don't mean argue. I mean physically fight. She had that ugly little switch in her, where the public mask would suddenly disappear, and she'd become pure rage. I had seen it enough times to know how fast things could go bad. So even while I stayed composed, a part of me was on alert, watching her, tracking her movements, waiting for the possibility that she might come storming across that bar and try to turn the whole night into a scene. Then my date leaned toward me and said something that made me laugh despite myself. She said, "If she starts something, don't worry, I can handle myself." And the way she said it, calm, steady, almost amused, I believed her. That woman had more confidence in one sentence than I'd felt in years. And for the first time that night, I realized I wasn't just surviving the situation. I was actually enjoying watching my ex fail. Not because I'm sadistic, not because I wanted violence, but because after years of being trapped inside her chaos, it felt incredible to finally see her lose control while I kept mine. And then, as if the universe decided I hadn't been rewarded enough already, it handed me the perfect opportunity. About an hour into the night, this older drunk guy wandered over to our table. You know the type. Red face, sloppy confidence, breath that could probably strip paint. The kind of man who mistakes persistence for charm and alcohol for personality. He locked onto my date immediately and started hitting on her like I wasn't even sitting there. She politely said no. He grinned like she was flirting. Then he tried again. She said no again. Then he tried a third time. By that point, it had crossed over from annoying into pathetic. I was about 2 seconds away from getting up and telling him exactly where he could go. But then something happened. A thought slid into my head so perfectly timed and so deliciously petty that I actually felt myself smile. Not a big smile, just that tiny, dangerous smile you get when an idea lands in your brain, fully formed. My friend saw me start to stand and immediately asked what I was doing. I just looked at him and said, "Watch this." Then I walked over to the bar. The old drunk had shuffled back to his stool, probably to recover whatever scraps of dignity he still had left. I sat down beside him casually like we were just two guys making conversation. I nodded in the direction of my table and said, "Struck out, huh?" He gave this sad little laugh and immediately launched into a sloppy, drunken speech about how women never gave him a chance, how he couldn't find a date anywhere, how nobody appreciated a nice guy anymore. The usual pathetic nonsense. And while he was rambling, I looked past him, straight across the room, straight at my wife, still floating around, still laughing too loudly, still checking every few seconds to see if I was watching, still convinced she was running the night. And in that exact moment, I knew this was going to be beautiful. So I leaned in toward the old drunk and lowered my voice like I was letting him in on a secret. Then I said, "Well, I don't know if it's your thing or not, but there is at least one woman in here who's been known to turn a trick or two." And I pointed directly at my wife. He followed my finger immediately. Now, to be clear, I didn't know exactly what he was going to say. And honestly, that made it even better. Because I knew no matter how he phrased it, whatever came out of that man's mouth was going to hit like a grenade. He straightened up, like I had just handed him the key to the kingdom. Then he got off his stool and made his way across the room toward her. And from where I was sitting, I had the perfect view. My wife saw him coming, and at first she looked pleased. She probably thought he was just another admirer, another man she had successfully pulled into her little attention circus. Another chance to perform, another chance to show me how wanted she still was. He walked right up to her, leaned in close, and whispered something in her ear. And for one perfect second, the whole world seemed to stop. Then she exploded. I mean, absolutely exploded. She let out this scream so loud it cut through the entire bar, like broken glass. Every conversation stopped. Heads turned. The music suddenly felt too quiet. And then she screamed the words I still remember to this day. "Michael, you bastard!" Loud enough for half the room to hear. Maybe all of it. Then she turned and bolted. Not walked, not stormed, ran. Straight for the door like the building was on fire. No comeback, no dramatic speech, no attempt to recover, no final insult to save face. Just pure, humiliated panic. Out the door. Gone. And for maybe 2 full seconds, the entire place sat in silence. Then people started laughing. Not everyone. But enough. More than enough. Enough for her to know exactly what had happened. Enough for the whole thing to be burned into her memory forever. And I just sat there smiling. If you've never lived with an abusive person, maybe that sounds petty. Maybe it sounds childish. Maybe it sounds like a small thing. But people who have never had their emotions controlled for years don't understand what a moment like that can mean. Because when someone has spent that long humiliating you, manipulating you, threatening you, and making your pain feel like their entertainment, there is something almost holy about watching them lose control in public. Not because you become them, not because cruelty becomes justice, but because for one brief, perfect moment, the shame belongs to them. For years, she had made me feel small. For years, she had controlled the emotional temperature of my life. For years, she had used humiliation as a weapon. And in one ridiculous, stupid, beautifully timed moment, she got a taste of what it feels like when the room turns on you and there's nothing you can do to stop it. That's what made it so satisfying. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to prove anything. I just gave her a situation she couldn't dominate. She walked into that bar thinking she still had power over me, thinking she could break me with a few looks, a few fake laughs, a few little public humiliations. Instead, she ended up humiliating herself so badly that she ran out the front door screaming my name. There's a lesson in that. People who rely on power, manipulation, intimidation, and public humiliation are often much weaker than they look. They seem untouchable right up until the moment they lose control of the story. And once they lose control of the story, they fall apart fast. That's exactly what happened to her. And I got front row seats. As far as I know, she never came back to that bar again. Not once. And believe me, if she had, I would have heard about it. That place was one of those neighborhood spots where everybody eventually knows everything. But she stayed gone. And honestly, that might have been the sweetest part of all. Because it meant she remembered. It meant she couldn't rewrite the night in her favor. She couldn't charm her way out of it. She couldn't bully her way through it. She couldn't spin herself back into the victim. That place was ruined for her. Burned. Poisoned. Finished. All because she walked in there, convinced she still had power over me. She didn't. Not anymore. And that night, for one of the first times since leaving, I truly understood something important. My life was actually mine again. Not legally, not perfectly, not overnight, but emotionally. And that matters more than people realize. Because freedom doesn't always arrive in some huge cinematic moment. Sometimes freedom shows up quietly. Sometimes it shows up in the exact second you realize someone can no longer control what happens inside you. Sometimes it shows up when their tricks stop working. Sometimes it shows up in a smoky little bar, while your abusive ex runs out the front door screaming your name. The woman I was with that night stayed calm through all of it. She never panicked, never made it awkward, never acted like I was crazy for feeling what I felt. She just sat there with this tiny, amused smile, like she had known all along my ex was about to make a fool of herself. Afterward, she looked at me and said something like, "Well, I guess she won't be bothering us tonight." And I laughed harder than I had in years. The kind of laugh that surprises you when it comes out, because you forgot your body still knew how to do that. And maybe that doesn't sound like much to people who've never had their spirit slowly worn down by another human being. But to me, that laugh meant everything. It meant the tension wasn't winning. It meant the fear wasn't in charge. It meant for once, I wasn't the one going home humiliated. It meant I was starting to come back to life. This happened a very long time ago, more than 20 years. And no, I didn't spend the rest of my life chasing revenge or living off that moment. That's not the point of the story. The point is that sometimes one moment can mark the end of somebody's hold over you. One moment where the spell breaks, one moment where the fear cracks, one moment where the person who once felt larger than life suddenly looks exactly as small and pathetic as they really are. That night didn't erase the abuse. It didn't fix everything. It didn't magically heal me. Healing still took time. Trust still took time. Peace still took time. But that night gave me something I desperately needed. Perspective. Because once I saw her run out of that bar, humiliated and exposed, I never quite saw her the same way again. She stopped feeling bigger than me. She stopped feeling all-powerful. She stopped feeling like someone whose emotions controlled my weather. She became what she really was. Just another deeply broken person who had mistaken cruelty for strength. And once you see that clearly, they lose a lot of power. So yeah, even now, all these years later, I still smile when I think about it. Not because I'm proud of being mean. Not because I think revenge fixes pain. But because after years of being broken down by someone who thought they owned my emotions, I finally got to watch them lose. And the best part is, she did it to herself. All I did was give her the opportunity. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be violent. Sometimes it doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it doesn't even need to be complicated. Sometimes all it takes is one perfectly timed push, and the right person will destroy themselves in public. And when they do, all you have to do is smile.